Hey, welcome to my new YouTube channel, Fumble and Focus. This channel is currently zero production quality, but hopefully some useful content, and if there's interest, I will enhance the production quality, produce titles, and do nicer shots and things. If there's interest, if there's some future in this. But really, I have been shooting digital for 20 years as I would say amateur, mostly unpaid, but I did have work published, both online and in magazines. So I'm somewhere probably around, I would say, advanced amateur, although recently I'm probably questioning this more and more. As I've had reason to get back into photography recently, I've spent a bit more money, I've got back into film photography, and I'm finding that the more I'm spending and the more advanced gear I'm getting, perhaps the more mistakes I'm making. So this is really an effort to document my current journey and the mistakes I'm making, perhaps get some feedback, also document successes and fixes for equipment I have. Hopefully in my doing this, maybe it will save some of you some time and effort if you hit similar problems. So 10 years ago, I was in a flea market in the UK and I picked up a Kodak Instamatic. This was the same as I had as a child, and I have good memories and some good photos taken with this. Perhaps when I was 10 years old, my ability to compose and frame images was not so great, but the image quality for a fixed lens, fixed aperture camera was pretty good. And 10 years ago in the UK, I managed to pick up some expired film, which I believe expired in, I don't know if you can see this, probably not. Anyway, expired in 1971, so it's just a few years out of date. But I always intended to open the cartridge and put some 35mm film in the 126 cartridge, and recreate some childhood photos of my old home where I grew up, and perhaps where I had a photograph of my father's car on the driveway, a Citroen BX, I think. I thought maybe I'd recreate it with a modern car on the same driveway, on the same house, taken with the same camera, or the same model camera at least. Anyway, I then moved away from England and this project was abandoned. And then recently in a flea market in Finland, I found an Agfamatic camera, which I think is Fuji's version of the Kodak Instamatic. And suddenly I thought, well, maybe I could do this now, using this. So I now have a 3D printer, and I 3D printed some cases, 126 cases, which I could reload with 35mm film. None of that really went to plan. Nothing worked properly. The cartridges wouldn't fit the Instamatic correctly. I think I need to do some redesign. So yeah, that project is still ongoing, but I visited the UK, I picked up the Instamatic I originally got and the cartridge, so if I can't 3D print it, I can open this one and reload that with 35mm film as I originally intended, and also take some accurate measurements, so perhaps I can create my own cartridge or modify one of the existing designs and 3D print something that actually does fit and work. And there's more to this story, including the dimensions and the distance of the film from the lens and the flatness. There's lots of things that I can go into in a further discussion, and maybe if I actually do this and make some progress with it. But the interest in film has, I guess, been rekindled, and I have a range of Pentax cameras, which has put me in a really great place to get back into film. And not only Pentax, but I live in Finland. I live just south of Tampere, where we have the awesome camera store .fi. And of course, being Pentax, it's K-mount, and so I picked up a film SLR, which is also K-mount. And I already have a whole range of lenses from the digital SLRs that I've collected over the years with manual aperture controls. So what a great place to get back into analog photography. So yeah, in a similar vein, I got interested in half-frame 35mm photography. Given the cost of film currently, it seemed like a great way to get back in without spending a huge amount. Little did I know. I bought a Kodak Ektar H35N, which I thought would be a modern day equivalent of my old Kodak Instamatic, albeit half frame. Basically point and shoot, fixed lens, fixed aperture. I thought it would just be fun to play with. So I shot a roll of film. I think I loaded it with 400 ISO Kodak Gold, shot a roll of film, sent it off for development, got it back, and I didn't pay for scanning because I wanted to do this myself. This was another project of mine. Scanned in all the images and, to be honest, massively disappointed. I remember my childhood camera, the images being sharp and generally good quality. I still have many of these photographs. The Kodak Ektar H35N, I noticed a lot of images out of focus. I guess minimum focus distance is maybe not that good. Maybe I was not holding it still enough. I don't really understand, because as a child I paid no attention to anything. I just point and shot. No consideration for stability or anything. But a lot of the images with the Ektar are soft. There's a little bit of blur, like I moved the camera whilst taking them. And I also noticed after scanning the images that around the edge of the frame the focus was worse. Now, I'm not 100% sure if this is down to the lens in the Ektar, or if my scanning setup, which is a kind of DIY setup, maybe wasn't holding the negative completely flat. Therefore, with the narrow depth of field from scanning or photographing with a DSLR, maybe the negative, maybe it was the focus on the scanning side. So this is something I need to look into. Talking of which, on the scanning side, I 3D printed a negative 3D printed a negative holder, so it can keep the thing upright, flat. It's not modified at all, but I did stick some felt pads inside just to comfortably hold the negative in place delicately without scratching it. So this is something that I need to develop further. I've experimented, I've got better at the focusing. Oh, and yes, an adventure in adapting my existing lens with extension tubes to get basically macro photography of the negatives to fill the frame basically on a DSLR. So there's lots of moving parts. There's lots of things I've done, some reasonably well and other bits not so well. I think the whole thing needs a bit more investigation and a bit more time, but this is what I'm hoping to document because I find it interesting. Maybe you do too, who knows. But this adventure took me into other cameras. I was originally looking at the Pentax 17 and I thought I can't really justify this, as nice as it is and as wonderful as the images look. So I bought a Olympus Pen D, and it was delivered when I was visiting the UK, and I noticed immediately that it had a problem with the aperture control. I had to think then. The aperture control had been forced and it had broken the mechanism. So while I was in the UK, I ordered a second Olympus Pen D, and I thought between the two of them I can create a working model. So I fixed this one, only to then find that the winding mechanism has failed, which I think is due to the springs aging. The other example of this camera I have is in much better condition, but it has some misting on an internal lens which I've not addressed. And that one, even though I've not shot with it, just from exercising the mechanism, now also has a winding problem. So my attempt at spending not very much money to get into half frame has so far cost me 60-70 euro Ektar H35N, 50 or 60 pound Olympus Pen D, and then another 50 or 60 pound Olympus Pen D, all of which have problems. But I must say, the one thing that does work on these is the light meter, which apparently, using a selenium solar panel, solar cell, is one of the things that's known to fail. So these in that way have been a success. But I've spent probably a good proportion of what I would have spent on a new Pentax 17, and with that I would have had a lot less issues, a lot less headaches disassembling cameras. Maybe it wouldn't have been as exciting and wouldn't have been as much to document, but I think financially it would have made more sense just to buy the Pentax 17. Especially when I shot a roll of film in this camera, if I hold it up the right way, and my results have not been particularly good. I did shoot a roll of expired film, and it was cheap expired film. I think it was Agfa Premier something. It was 10 years out of date, so I overexposed it, but still using the light meter and exposing, some of the exposures were wrong. I'm not sure. I checked the shutter speed and the timing all seems actually absolutely spot on. But some of the exposures were underexposed still, even though I overexposed it by one stop to make up for the 10-year expiry of the film. Focus, clearly, if I'm not looking through an SLR and I'm not looking at the image, then my judgment is off, because I would say possibly 50-60% of the film was out of focus. Some other images were blurry, where clearly the shutter speed was too low. If it was a 28mm lens, for example, I was trying to shoot at least twice that in terms of speed, so 60 or thereabouts, as light conditions would obviously allow. So my experience has not been good with sharpness or anything, and I thought, again, maybe this was my scanning setup. So when I was in the UK, I don't think this is those, but no, these are new negatives. When I was in the UK, I picked up some negatives that I have from my childhood, and I scanned them in, and my scanning was absolutely pin sharp. So I don't think it's my scanning setup. I think it's just the camera, or the lens, or perhaps me. I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I was paying attention to the focus distance and setting everything appropriately. Results just not meeting my expectations, and perhaps my expectations were too high. But looking at some of the images people have posted online taken from the Pentax D, I feel like their results are much better than mine. So this again is another topic I need to continue. And again, mentioning 3D printing, lens caps, 3D printed lens caps is something I've been doing a lot of, because a lot of these cameras have come without lens caps, so I've modified the designs, changed the size. So maybe I can modify these further and upload the designs myself. In terms of the problems I said I had with digital photography, I started digital photography with a Pentax KX, which is the basic introduction range from, I don't know, 15 or so years ago, longer than that, I guess. And I had some really great results with it. And then recently I took it on vacation thinking, well, it takes AA batteries, it's fairly lightweight, and with a small prime lens, it's easily portable. Every single image was out of focus. There's no focus indication in the viewfinder, but even so, I never had problems with this previously. I think I usually do center focus and then reframe, or to compose the image. image results, most of the vacation photos were very poor, out of focus. I don't understand what has happened with the camera. I assumed it was the camera. But that was my first bad recent experience with photography. And I have been shooting a Pentax K5, which has been my camera for the last 10 years, I guess, with great results. I have some basic, the Pentax Prime lenses, which have all been fantastic. And then recently I took advantage of the crashing prices in the DSLR market and I picked up a K3. And using the same lenses, I've had some really great images, and I've had a lot, well, not a lot, I've had a fair share of missed focus images, which it does not seem consistent. I thought maybe the camera was back focusing or front focusing, but it's not on every image. And I don't rely on the automatic focus points. I always do center focus and recompose. That way I can guarantee, especially shooting models, that it's focused on their eyes. This is how I've always worked, and as I say, most photos are okay, but there's a significant proportion where focus is missed. And I find this more noticeable with the 35mm prime than the 50. So I've tried doing all the adjustments using focus charts and back and forward focus calibration on the camera, and I did notice it was slightly out, so I've corrected it. It's set up for all my lens selection in the memory, but I still notice focus issues, especially on the 35mm lens. And I think it's an f2.4, so it's not. The depth of field shouldn't even be that narrow. And pixel peeping on the images it produced, I can't see where it has focused. Normally, if it's focused forward, you will see something, especially on the ground, where you can see a clear plane, a clear focus point. But in these images, not. So that is something else that I need to look into. But it does feel like a frustrating time, because everything I'm doing and everything I'm spending money on to try and improve my ability actually seems to be having a worse result than anticipated. If I had stuck with the K5 2S and I had stuck with the lenses, 35 and 50mm primes, I do have others, but for the photography I do, that's the lenses I typically find myself shooting. Life would have perhaps been so much easier, but the K3 is a fantastic camera. If you need the autofocus and the eye tracking on live view and all this other stuff, it's fabulous. Higher pixel count, image quality is really very good. But I am finding a bit more frustration. I don't know whether the camera is highlighting some of the softness in the lenses that maybe the lower resolution sensor didn't highlight, or whether there's something else going on, but it is inconsistent. And it is disappointing when you do a photo shoot and you see what should be really great images coming back, or after the raw development being out of focus or soft. I don't know if this channel will be a success, but if you have interest in any of these topics, or any suggestions, or things you'd like to see me do and maybe fail, who knows, maybe even succeed at, let me know and we'll see where this journey takes us. So that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Do all the normal like and subscribe, blah blah, and we'll see where we end up next. Thank you and goodbye.